Hey guys, Drake here with the second episode in my Starmade tutorial series. Today I'll be going over power reactor modules, how they function, the most efficient power systems, and power capacitors. So the first thing I want to go over is how to make power reactors if you're just starting out. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to open up your inventory, go to this craft up here, find yourself some raw materials. Any minerals and any crystals that you find will work for making power reactors and power capacitors. So to make the power reactors, you're going to need alloyed metal mesh, and to create the power capacitors, you're going to need crystal composite. So the way that you would get these is you would first refine the raw materials. You would just open this little inventory, whatever you've mined, drop them in here, and they will be refined every time that this bar goes over. It will refine a number of them. So anyway, you will need 20 of each type of material to make one power reactor module and one power capacitor. So basically you're going to need a lot if you want to do anything super powerful, or of course you can just buy them at shops or trade them with other factions and other players. So however you want to obtain them is up to you, but I figured I would show this to you just so that you know how to do this. Now you will need a basic factory to be able to do this. So this shows you how you can make the basic factory. It's pretty simple. It'll take either crystal composite or alloy metal mesh. Doesn't matter which one you want to use. You just need 10 of one or the other to create the basic factory. Now, in the basic factory, once you have it, to go ahead and create the power reactors, you would need to go to change production, find them, which you can just do that to make it a little bit easier because that list is ridiculously long. So if you just type power in the top, you'll get power capacitor and power reactor, because they're currently the only power blocks in the game. So once you select it, you hit OK. It says it's there. You just activate production. It'll actually be automatically on. And then you just put the alloyed metal mesh in here for power reactor modules. And if you need to know what it takes to make them, you can just view the production recipe. So for each one power reactor module, it takes 20 alloyed metal mesh. So that's basically how you do it. Pretty simple. So here's the first build. It's the cube. This shape here is basically the least efficient build that you can get. So it is generating 1,429 or 24.9 generation a second, so it's generating that much power a second. The generation efficiency, which is 52.77, is how much per block is being generated. There are 27 blocks in this cube, so this is actually a decent bit of power for, you know, a small cube. I guess if you're just getting started out and you need something super simple and don't have time to waste on it because you gotta get away from where you're at, you could do something like this just for simplicity. But this is the least efficient thing that you can do for a ship. Literally the least efficient. So this is the next most efficient thing that you can do. Rather than having one giant block, you could have a few different groups of blocks. These ones I just did in sets of 2 to make it simple, but you can already see that the efficiency is 3 times as much, roughly. Well, almost 3 times as much. But it's using the exact same number of blocks. Moving on. This build here, as you can see, is generating just a little bit more than that one, with also the same amount of blocks. And what this is single blocks. Every single one of these blocks is not touching another block. So they're all just single blocks, not connected at all. And it generates 3,803.3 power a second, has an efficiency of 140, which is not bad. This actually is more efficient if you can't have groups with an extremely small ship that you're making. I suppose if you wanted to do like a shuttle idea, this might actually be more efficient than anything else if you don't have a lot of space. And I'll explain that in a minute. So, this right here is even more efficient, as you can see. Although it's not much more efficient than having single blocks, it is just by a little bit. So, what is it that makes this more efficient? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, each of these being 9 blocks long is what makes it more efficient. If you actually take away these blocks and make it into a line of less than 9, it then becomes more efficient to do single groups. Just so that you know. 9 is the breaker point for doing single groups like this. If you have more than 9 blocks, 9 power blocks that you're planning on putting something, and you can put them in a line, that is the most efficient system that you can really do for it. But you'll notice this one is just a little bit more efficient. And it's almost exactly the same. I'll tell you what's different here. You'll notice that these blocks, or these groups, actually have one more block in them. So, if I'm not mistaken, it should be more than 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And that's what increases the efficiency here, is that it is actually more blocks in the same group. Now, if I was to take all of those in this middle group and then add them on top of these, even though it would be the same number of blocks, it would be even more efficient. Just so that you know, the grouping actually does matter in Starmade, and the more blocks that you have in a single grouping without being in the same dimension, the more power you have. And I will show you the most efficient builds in just a second here. If you basically can make one giant group up until about 1,000,000 power generation per second, you're going to be making the most efficient ship by having it in one group where not a single block is in the same dimension. And what that means is either this line has to keep going and it just has to be super, super long, or you have to split it up into all directions. But once you put another block in the same direction, then it basically becomes less efficient. So, moving on to the most efficient builds that you can do. This one, for instance. This has changed it to 2 groups, using up about the same amount of space, but basically you have what looks to be the corner of a box, basically, or a cube. And we have 2 of these groups. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, I bet you could put another set of blocks over top of this exactly the same way, I've got that built right over there. And basically, yes, that is the idea of doing it this way. Most people call it a power cage, and this is one of the most efficient builds that you can use. So it is very effective, although it's a little bit odd to build ships around this shape unless you're doing some very specific things with it. So, to move on further, we also have star shapes. Basically, these are two groups that are roughly the same size, just like in those groups, and you'll notice it is pretty much exactly the same. Exactly the same. And then you get to where I've made them into one big group with the same number of blocks. And this is almost twice as efficient, as you can see here. We're generating 6,156 power a second off of the same number of blocks. And you can do the same thing with this. 6,156 per second with the same number of blocks, just in one bigger group. So I wanted to see how much of an effect it makes to do larger groups of the same thing. And so I made all of these to kind of illustrate a point. And I wanted to show you this one here, which is pretty inefficient. This is 100 blocks in this group. It's 4 walls that are not connected at all. And it is generating 6,719.5 per second, which is not much more than those power systems at the end over there that are generating 6,000 and some with 27 blocks. So this is pretty inefficient. 62 or 67.2 generation per block basically in this particular set. Something interesting though is if you put a single power block right here and connect this wall at the back with that one in the middle, all of a sudden this will double in efficiency because of the way the dimensions are set up. So you can kind of work the way that the dimension system works and find a happy balance between having just solid chunks of power blocks and having really, really long systems. Doing lines is also pretty effective if you don't mind having long, slender ships, or, it just depends on what you want to build. But this one is actually generating 21,000 power a second, almost 22,000 power a second, with the same amount of blocks that this one is generating only 6,700. That is almost 4 times as much power. Just to give you an idea of how much more efficient it is to create groups that have much larger dimensions. See, a straight line is actually the most efficient build that you can do, just like these and the cages. They're all just as efficient. This is the same number of groups, so what I did is 4 groups with the same number of blocks, 25 in each block, and you'll see this is exactly as efficient as that, and this cage is exactly as efficient as those. They just take up different amounts of space. And the plus signs, also just as efficient. 4 groups of them connected together. Well, they're not connected together, they just kind of are part of the same ship. And of course, once again, just to illustrate the difference in how much power you can generate with putting them together in one large group, if you can do it. Same amount of blocks as is generating 21,000 over here with a fairly efficient build is generating 48,000 power a second. So that's pretty much how the power reactors work. So now it's time to move on to power capacitors. Power capacitors are made the same way as the power reactors, except they're made with crystal composite instead of metal mesh. So I will go ahead and start with what the least efficient systems for power capacitors are. So this system is actually the least efficient for a power capacitor. None of those power capacitors are actually touching each other, so they're all single capacitors. And currently they're adding 10,000 power capacity to your ship. These kind of act as a battery for your ship. So the power reactor modules generate power, power capacitor modules hold power. So the more of these that you have on a ship, the more power reserve you have, and then the power reactors will regenerate the power that is held within your reserve. So, this most inefficient group gives you exactly 1,000 power per block added. That's at the absolute worst efficiency. Now, your ship core gives you 50,000 power, regardless of what's connected to it or what the ship has on it. So even if you don't put a single capacitor on your ship, you will have 50,000 power just from making a ship. Now, this ship would have 60,000 power from the power capacitors and the ship core. This one is basically just 2, 2, 2, 2, and then 2 on the backside. So they're not connected, just 2 blocks together. But what you'll notice here is, it gained a little bit of efficiency. An added 35 power storage per power capacitor, just to have them connected to each other. Then this one just has them in 2 groups of 5. So this is even more efficient. Makes you wonder if they're most efficient just connected to each other, and that is true, actually. All that you have to do to make them most efficient is to make sure that they're all connected to each other. So, this one, all 10 are connected in the block, and it is getting an added 122.01 power per block. And that actually has a light bit of diminishing return, but it's only a diminishing return on the amount added. So you can never go negative by putting all of these in a group. Basically, the bigger the group, the more efficient every single block becomes, but it loses a level of efficiency the more of them that you add. So, in other words, just with 10 blocks connected together, I'm getting an additional 122. But for me to get another 122, it might take me 40 more blocks to get that much more efficiency out of each block. So there's a little bit of a diminishing return just from the sheer number of them connected to each other. But it's still more efficient than separating them from the group. So truly, the most efficient way to set up power capacitors is just to have them all connected if you can do it. And these are just other illustrations of the same point. These all have the same efficiency, same number of blocks, all connected to each other in different shapes. This one, I just wanted to point out that it is more efficient to continue adding more and more and more. So, as you can see, we got another 100 efficiency off of having 100 blocks connected. And that was the point that I was making. The more blocks you connect, the more efficient it gets, but the efficiency kind of has a diminishing return, or a diminishing addition of efficiency. This concludes my video on power systems. I hope you learned something from it. The next video in this series will be about shields. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, feel free to subscribe and definitely hit that like button.